Good evening. I am Jubair Ahmed. Lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining the discussion. Why democracy matters. Tonight, I will also be joined by Honorable Mr. Biraj Bahadur Bista, National Member of Rashtriya Shakti Nepal, former State Minister for Science and Technology, former Assistant Minister for Local Development and Federal Affairs. Ms. Parastuyari, Senior Advisor, State Ministry for Peace, Afghanistan. Mr. Tabid Awal, Mayoral Candidate, Dhaka North City Corporation, Bangladesh, and Honorable Member, National Executive Committee, Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Ms. Priya Sharma, National Co-in-charge, Study Circle, BJP, Yuv Morcha, India, Assistant Professor, the University of Delhi, India. Mr. Hafiz Ahmed Shahzad, Vice President, People's Student Federation, Punjab, Student Wing of Pakistan People's Party, Pakistan. In the center of global backlash against democratic values, need to play a stronger role in countering the narrative that democracy has failed by demonstrating its many benefits, the diversity, the transparency, and respect for human rights that are the bedrock of a democratic society contribute to the kind of development that makes nations, citizens more prosperous and more secure. Globally, populist leaders claim to be the eradicators of all social ills may attempt citizens to give power to a consolidated executive, participatory and inclusive democracy keeps citizens safer from extremism because it puts clear limits on the power of government and enables citizens to choose their leaders. In the sense, democracy matters because it makes citizens happier, more financially secure, safer, and better able to dictate what happens in their society. Now, please welcome Mr. Hafiz Ahmed Shehzad. Mr. Shehzad, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I
Mr.
can.
Shehzad, yes. In the first session, you will get 6 minutes to discuss regarding the title Why Democracy Matters. Please refer the present status of democracy in Pakistan.
Yeah, democracy is the blessing of God to the nations. It always protects the freedom of speech. It always protects the freedom of living. It always protects the freedom of media. It's like the basic right, basic necessity of human being. It's also noted that the where the democracy in the countries human rights developments like education sector, therefore it very well other than the countries that do not have democracy. Democracy is Pakistan. Fortunately, I am the part of the Pakistan People's Party. Our leadership sacrifices their lives for the sake of democracy in Pakistan. Nowadays, Pakistan Democratic Movement, Pakistan People's Party is proud part of Pakistan Democratic Movement. We build the speaking power and empower the people for speak against the inefficient government nowadays run in Pakistan. Pakistan People's Party always our history, our all leaders are sacrificed their lives for just the sake of democracy in Pakistan. Or I think so. Democracy in Pakistan just because of Pakistan People's Party.
Thank you, Mr. Shehzad. Thank you so much. Miss Priya, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Should I go?
Yeah, yes, it's your floor, and you will also
Yeah,
get 6 minutes. Thank you so much.
okay. Thank you so much for inviting me once again. I extend the words of gratefulness to you for providing me this platform to speak. When we speak, when you opened your speech, you laid a very good foundation for what I am to speak now. You started with saying that democracy has deteriorated, and what was promised. So the promise of democracy, as we say, that has not been delivered. I would slightly differ from that. Um, See, when we started with democracy, so democracy can be divided into various phases, like ancient or the medieval times, and there wasn't anything in the medieval times, something as democracy. If I'm to just relegate to the time period, then I may say medieval times, starting with Magna Carta and all. But in the modern times, the democracy, if we are to see, it starts with the American dream. It starts with the American debate on democracy. So when the founding fathers of the American uh, uh, Parliament of the Constitution, sorry, when they were discussing democracy, they very continuously used the term republic instead of democracy. There was a reason for that. Um, Democracy was a process. Of course, it existed from antiquity, um, but republic was a term which preceded democracy. So it is a pre-democratic term. Um, Now, when that was being discussed, I I was reading all of this, and then I came across this that I have to speak about this, that the republic. When we speak of republic, we cannot forget that the foremost republics of the world were found in India, in Vaishali, in the eastern state of Bihar, in India. Those were very primary forms of republic, where the chosen leader was. It didn't reflect the modern ethos of what democracy meant, what means to us today. But of course, it centered around the chosen heads. Now, if you to talk of the dance of democracy in India, post 1947. Um, for two long decades. The Indian dance of democracy has been quite baffling for many of scholars to understand. Why? Because India has as much diversity as one can think of, in terms of languages, ethnicity, regions, cultures, everything. So India was always thought of as an exception to the idea of consociational democracy. But Arvind Clayford, the famous scholar, he said that India, for the first 2 decades after independence, wasn't an exception. In fact, the Congress system which existed, that laid good grounds for India to be a consociational democracy. Come 70s, it was all broken. Why? Because there was a division in the Congress. This was the decade when emergency was imposed, and it was for the first time that democracy in India felt a severe jolt. Come 80s and 90s, this is very important for the democracy in India. Why? Because it was just one party which was representing the entire diversity of India uh, through its leaders till about 70s. But late 70s, a new phenomenon was experienced in India, whereby newer political parties or political platforms were emerging, which gave voices to the unheard people, of people who had different or diverse kind of viewpoints. Now, when we talk of democracy, and economy together have a very, very close link. We cannot talk of democratizing a society if we cannot democratize our markets. Our markets need to be democratized. In the 90s, that was witnessed with the structural reforms starting from early 90s and which was a landmark in India in the 1991 when India went for privatization and liberalization. And late 90s, when we see when the change in the government after a string of unstable governments, when a strong government of NDA first was formed, we see that the structural changes in the economy was led. And the coming decades, when the world was witnessing the economic meltdown, this was the period when India fared pretty well. This was why, because it was riding on the wave of good economic reforms, which was laid down. This particular decade that we're going to bid by very soon, in about how many days I can't even think of. It's yeah, in about 4 or 5 days we are going to bid by to this decade. This is an instrumental decade in the democratic journey of India. Why? Because 2014 onwards, the voices, the elites. See, the Indian democracy, for a large part, the upper structure has been dominated by the elites. This was for the first time that someone saw a tea seller, someone who doesn't have any record of any political power in the family, someone who came from what we call as the middle castes in India, because often the the label of casteism is labeled, casteism is an important factor in India. Caste is an important factor. So someone coming from the middle caste makes it big in the Indian power system, forms his government, and given technology, the process of democratization begins in India. So if you were to compare this decade with the past decades and the voices that are to be seen in this, the public forums, you will see a massive difference there. So technology, of course, has played an important role, as did economy in the 90s and in the first decade of this particular century.
Thank you,
So,
Priya. Priya,
my
you
time
will
is
be
over.
yes,
Yeah,
you will be also honored for second time, no problem. So in
yeah.
that time, you also express your views. Miss Pastuari, this is your floor. Please welcome Miss Pastuari. Miss Wari, please. Yes.
Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah. Hello again for everybody. This is Parastori from Afghanistan. And I am glad to be part of this important discussion on why democracy is matter. And thank you for inviting me in this conference. Of course, democracy is a matter. It is matter worldwide for all global and democratic countries, and it a matter for Afghanistan too. 15 September has highlighted in United Nations calendar as an International Day of Democracy. United Nations calendar as an International Day of Democracy. That is to honor the democracy for the value which has provided worldwide. All of us learn in school that democracy is a system to govern people through people, but by the passage of time in different countries, democratic value has manipulated by the different view by politician and nation. But in my view, democracy as a school of thought which has a high impact and great achievement for country and nation worldwide. Under, uh, under democratic government, we can guarantee achieve the freedom of speech, equality, integrity, prosperity, social welfare. Furthermore, furthermore, we can highlight the freedom of religious for their followers and more and more. It is worth to mention that in the democratic system, in intellectual group of society are able to reach their thought and grow. We all know women's situation are very fragile and non-democratic countries, and it is democracy and democratic view which gave freedom and prosperity for women in such countries. In my country, Afghanistan, it is getting the text decades which women are fighting and struggling to reach and mention democracy, as it is not easy to stand for democracy in a dominated country. It is difficult to fight all obstacles ahead. As in a part of the country, the uneducated men's mindset is to not listen to the woman's voice. Moreover, they are not eager to give them the primary human's basic right. In the general, the men dominate society prefer to have silence women to only get the order and be quiet to
Yes,
get out
Ms.
of
Parasto, yes,
this. A
Ms. Parasto,
little, yeah, excuse me.
you will
Yeah.
be honored for
Again,
second time.
democracy is what? Excuse me?
You will be honored for second time. Just in the first session, I have a limited time for everyone. So you will
Yeah.
finish your another speech whenever you will get the second time. Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's okay, and maybe the all of my speech, the conclusion is the second session. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. This is Salvador. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Uh, it's your floor, and please welcome Mr. Tabidor. Just you will discuss regarding the title. Beside this, I will just a question in your context. What do you think are the main challenges of democracy in your eyes in South Asian countries?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jubair, especially for organizing this session. And I'm very honored to be sharing a platform with many wonderful people of South Asia, probably leaders of tomorrow. You know, democracy in essence has many definitions, but the primary objective is actually universally the same. One is primarily to be inclusive. So it's a system may have its own rules, own regulations, but the main objective of the system is to be inclusive. That is one aspect of democracy that I would view it as. Second is the founding of democracy or democratized institution is checks and balances. So a system where such there is not winner takes everything or majority rules everything. There are safeguards that nobody can go way out and beyond of what it is. The third beauty, I would say, of democracy is that the realization that nothing is forever. In non-democratic ways of governance, a lot of, whether we talk about kingdoms, dictatorships, or any of those sort, there is the sense that this is forever. It will never end. It will be passed down to some other heir apparent. But in a democratic system, there is a term, no matter how long or short the term may be. So everyone's understanding is that there is an end to this term, and only their work or the will of the people can continue your term or change your term. And it's also not ending. There's always a chance to come back if you're talking, politically speaking, to take responsibility or to, give something back to your society. In that aspect, I would say primarily in Bangladesh, right now, the biggest problem is disenfranchisement. A lot of people feel they're disenfranchised with their own government and the system of governance. Too long in the recent history of democracy that we have actually narrowed down democracy to the field of election. We only feel that if there's an election, there's a voting pattern, that is democracy. I do not feel that is true. Democracy includes institutions which govern your system or your nation, how autonomous those institutions are, and how accountable people of those institutions are to society as a whole. So, in those aspects, I would say, in overall in South Asia, the elected democracy is obviously one of the biggest challenges we have, because in the South Asian region, we 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 have the highest number of population, but the highest number of different population. We have different ethnicities, as one of our speakers previously mentioned. We are, different in terms of language. We're different in terms of culture. We're in difference in terms of region. Some are more agrarian regions, some are more flood prone region, some are more mountainous region, and all these things matter. Where we come from, how we were raised, it matters. So South Asia's challenge is obviously trying to find that perfect democratic system where everyone can be represented or participated. Challenge in South Asia is that our current governments or government politicians have, again, as I said, narrowed us into that fight of election. Who will win, who will not win, who's contributing so much, who's not contributing so much. But overall in South Asia, we have bigger challenges which democracy can face, which is in education, which is in healthcare, which is in bringing more gender equality and gender parity. A lot of social aspects that, their South Asians have done wonderful work around the world. But in South Asia itself, as a region, we are lagging behind. And that's something that I feel that democracy is the solution. And the way we are implementing it is actually the obstacle. But the theory or the objective behind it is our actual solution to move forward. I'll stop for now. Thank you for the time so far.
Thank you, Mr. Tabidal. Thank you so much. Mr. Biraz, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Zubair.
Mr. Biraz, yes, it's
Can you
your
hear me?
floor. It's your floor, please.
Okay, Mr. Zubair, can you please repeat the question once again?
In the first session, you can discuss regarding the title, why democracy matters. In the second session, I will just give you a topic like discuss.
Oh, okay. Well, why? First of all, I'd like to thank you, the South Asian Young Politicians Forum, Mr. Zubair, and to have met distinguished here, and to all the participants who are listening from all around the world. Why democracy matters in itself is a very difficult question. It looks simple, but at the same time, it's a difficult question. If you look at the fundamentals of why democracy matters, we talk about freedom of speech, we talk about human rights, women's rights, dignity, equality, press freedom, inclusiveness, and all of that. All these are important fundamentals as to why democracy matters. But if you look at the underlying principle as to why democracy matters, then we really have to look at the concept of the freedom of thought. Because without the freedom of thought, without democracy being strong, the freedom of thought in any particular country cannot be strong. So basically, if you look at why freedom of thought and what it entails, if I can read a definition that I've written here, free thinking entails the power and privilege to be able to generate ideas and thought of your own, undiluted by prejudices of society, and it represents an ability to think without bias, question without fear, and speak without regret. So when I say it represents an ability to think without bias, question without fear, and speak without regret, in the South Asian context, or in the Nepali context, so to say, it becomes a problem. It becomes a dilemma. Like my friend Tabit says, because we represent such a huge number of diversity in the South Asian context. And in Nepal also, in a small country like Nepal, we have 120 different ethnicities, over 120 different languages, religions, and it becomes difficult to represent everyone and everybody, you know. So it is only in democracy, so to say, that you have to think how your idea or how your set of rules, principles, and values will relate to the other. The other meaning the other group, the other community, the other religion, and basically, you know, other than yourself. So the idea that before you, you know, there has to be the other in our context. So democracy is the only philosophy or the only system which allows you to think other than yourself. So it is only allowed in the freedom of thought, and this ability comes only when you are able to, or you consider what others think, you know. So democracy is, in that sense, matters to us because it allows us to think not only just for ourselves, but for others also. Like, you know, like my friend Tavit said earlier, when you talk about inclusiveness, when you talk about when you have to consider about the other communities, the minorities, and all the different geographical factors that we have to take in within our own country. You know, there's no other better system in the world which allows to incorporate to consider, you know, everyone in the society. And unless and until you do that, you know, you keep trying in democracy, there's no other way, you know. The other thing, like in Nepal, you know, when, or not only in Nepal, if you look at the South Asian context, we are confined to our societal prejudices and religious prejudices. From what I mean from that is, say for example, in Nepal, people tend to believe that if you are born something, you are born because of your past life, you know. So to say that people believe in the karma, you know. And in another instance, we also have class structures which has created sort of a mental prejudice or confines people in a certain boundary, limiting people to think in only certain defined terms, you know. So in Nepal, there's a famous book called Fatalism and Development, where the scholar Dorvadar Pista has termed it as fatalism and development. That the inherent socio belief system or the cultural system has limited developmental growth in Nepal, you know, which also holds true in the democratic development of any country. So because if you are limited to your religious prejudices, or if you are limited to just your societal values, then it does not really allow one to be democratic. So, in a democratic system, or in a country where there is critical thinking or rational thinking people, uh, you should be able to, or the country should be able to move beyond these societal prejudices. And only democratic country or country allows you to do that. You know. So that you're not just limited with your own value system or your own societal belief systems. So I'll stop here for now and then move on to the second question.
Well, I will come to you again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, uh, Hafiz, are you here? Hear me? Hafiz, I draw your kind attention, please. Can you hear me?
Who are you asking for? It's not very clear, the sound.
Mr. Hafiz Ahmed.
Yeah.
Mr. Hafiz,
Hello. Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. Ms. Hafiz, I draw your kind attention, please. It's your floor. Just I have a question to you that in your context, the context means Pakistan. What do you think are the main challenges to democracy?
As I discuss the history of Pakistan, the democracy itself, democracy, democratic governments or fair elections or transforming the governments from dictatorship to democratic governments. So democratic governments are always in threats in Pakistan from establishment. So Pakistan democracy always has challenges to do work efficiently in their own ways. Pakistan in nowadays after uh, I think 46 years or 47 years of dictatorship in Pakistan, democracy is always had less time. Democratic government has less time than the dictatorship rule there Pakistan. So in Pakistan, democracy is now become stronger day by day. So reconciliations of different political parties to they think they united, they stand united, they can give their go the united they can give people to more relief, more strong democracy in Pakistan. In Pakistan, establishment are stronger than the political parties. Establishment means bureaucracy, bureaucracy in Pakistan, the military establishment, the judicial establishment, and other establishments. Like they always they always tries to destroy democratic governments, but now will also think that the Pakistani people is need a democracy. So nowadays democracy is like a growing tree in Pakistan. They spread their leaves, they spread their roots to the whole country and the heart of people.
Okay, Mr. Hafiz, thank you so much. Miss Priya, okay. Miss Priya, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Yes, I have a question. That is, the global trend toward populist and nationalist political forces has been blamed by some of your reaction to the perceived failure of democracy, as many major democracies worldwide face destabilizing global and national events. What do you think?
Pardon, I didn't get. Are you referring to the um, the popular notion that
The populist and
right-wing
nationalist,
governments are on a rise everywhere?
the populist and nationalist matters that destabilizing democracy in the world. In some countries, like I would not like to mention, but what do you think?
Okay. First, because as a scholar of political scientist, I would like to make a very, very strong distinction between what the West thinks is right or left or center. Their definition of the right, left, or center, the roots lay in the Renaissance and in the Reformation period, and accordingly, as the political developments happened in the countries there, based on those developments, their association of what is a right or a center or a left wing government is they define it accordingly. Uh, in in our country per se, in India per se, the definition of right or the center or the left. Left, of course, the left here isn't left according to what the Europe defines left to be. The center is by default center because they don't fit in either right or they don't fit in either or on the left side, and therefore they happen to be on the centrist as the centrist parties. The right parties are a few fringe parties in India, smaller in in their structure. I mean, in the reach that they have, they are minuscule, hardly garner much of the votes, and don't have much of a say in the national electoral discourse. I won't consider the European standards of right, left, or center applicable to at least India. As far as the populist and the nationalist governments are concerned, there is no harm being a nationalist government, to be very, very true. Nationalism, if that's the allegation labeled by the European countries, then everything grew from their own backyard. The Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 established nation states, and for the following 150 years, there was much of a flux in understanding what it actually meant. And so nationalist governments got a bad name only in the First World War. In the Second World War, following their their actions, that's when the word became dirty, especially with the Truman speech, when the Marshall Plan was initiated post Second World War. Democracy came to be associated with a particular kind of notions, the predetermined factors which were now important, which had now become important, were the forerunners for the idea of democracy. I think then that democracy becomes a very value-laden term. How the countries define democracy to be very, very true, because I will just give you one example. The participation of women in politics is abysmal worldwide. While it is said that in the West it is much better than what we have here in South Asia, despite the fact that the first elected head of a nation was from Sri Lanka, followed by nations such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So it comes as a surprise. Although yes, of course, I'm not getting into how what are the factors which were important in pushing these women into power positions. But if we are to look into the participation of women, India in 2019 elections, the general elections, the percentage of women who participated as voters is 65 point, let me just see, 65.63% in comparison to males that stood at 67.09. So the difference isn't much if you see. About 9% of women in total were given the tickets out of all the candidates who were fielding, who were contesting elections. 9% of them were women, but the ones who got elected to the parliament, about of all those who got elected, 14% of them were women. So you see, the chances of women gets better. With the attributes of a nationalist or a right wing, or the value laden terms that comes along with it, all of that falters if you just happen to look at the changes that have come from 2014 onwards, whereby the inclusiveness of women, of people who had been neglected, of women who had been neglected because they happened to belong to one particular community and nobody thought that they should have their rights. All of that, the inclusiveness that was shown, getting the youth from different cultures and different regions aboard, getting people from very humble backgrounds on board, women who have faced violence, getting them on board. If you to look into all of this, the allegations that are labeled fall flat on their faces, I feel.
Thank you so much, Ms. Priya.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Ms. Pastu, can you hear me? Are you here?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I have a specific question to you regarding democracy. The agenda of intra-Afghan negotiations will include discussion of how to implement a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire and a political roadmap for the future of Afghanistan. Mentioning about democracy. Again, how far Afghan from democratic practice?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Jobir, and my last is not finished. And as I highlighted in my view, the conclusion is and the finish time, maybe speak about the negotiation team and the peace talks. Democracy is a matter in such country which allow men and women to get addicted. I know it is time consuming, but now why democracy is a matter for Afghanistan? Because of freedom of speech, a democratic government system, importance of citizenship, view of women's, social justice points on constitution, freedom or religions for religious minorities, reach of women and children on equal education. Today's Afghan is on the transition period of war to peace. All nation is looking forward to get an honorable peace and continuation of our democratic practice to have all human rights values for our country. We are, as a nation, trying our best to guard our young democracy and save our constitution. This is my conclusion. Speak about why democracy is a matter. To come on your next question, sure, parliamentary system is a part of democratic views. One, yeah, which allow us to get and mention democracy is in our country. Maybe this time the Afghan negotiation peace talk is start. Maybe I hope the all Afghan people, especially the women, hope that maybe peace is come, and I don't know what happened the future situation, especially the situation of women, children, and the minorities. I don't know, and I hope everything is okay. And this time, and I was up for the region country, and if they can help the peace process of Afghanistan, maybe for the sake of the democracy, maybe they can help, and especially the women or children or the minorities, they want help about the peace process, about the security situation, about all of them. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Awal, I draw your kind attention, please. Mr. Awal, I have a specific question in our session that in the contemporary politics, we observe the common feature of government in South Asian countries, basically like the tendency of demolishing oppositions, an authoritarian approach in all organs of the country, see politics of populism, violation of religion, human rights, and so-called development campaign, use of religion in politics, abuse of nationalism, etc. Do you think such a culture of politics will bring prosperity for people in greater sense?
Thank you, Mr. Jubair. Although I am very proud to be of a huge, South Asian diaspora, and I do one day see that this diaspora being actually unitedly and leading the world. But unfortunately, in politics, I should not and I will not comment on another country's, affairs in the current state of affairs. So for Bangladesh itself, since that's where I'm from and that's where I'm presenting, I would say that the current system of the abuse of our current democratic norms and or absence of democratic norms is not going to bring any prosperity going forward. And if we just want to discuss the debate, it's just data is good enough. If we look at the economic data pre-COVID, already the economies were slowing down, and this is pre-COVID times I'm talking about. And of course, post-COVID, there's many many types of way to analyze the data and how we turn around from these things. But however, as I said, despite the upper end of democratic discussion, which is on pure elections, pure parliamentary processes, there are a lot of local elections, local government, and local issues that are handled by the localities of Bangladesh as well as South Asia. Hence, you're seeing that at least in the socio-economic front, where democracy or representation, whatever system it is present, in those areas, the socio-economic improvements are actually visible. Whether it be, health initiatives, a little bit of education initiatives, agricultural support, microfinance. So these are all actually also systematically working. But when we look at the upper end, as we talk about, the upper end of democracy, in Bangladesh, we're seeing disenfranchisement. We're seeing a huge inequality of income. And these are government data I'm talking about. That, the rich are getting much richer, and then the poor are getting, poorer, and the inequality is increasing. And in terms of representation, this I can talk about for South Asia itself. In South Asia, whenever we have this fragmented, way of democracy or a way of elections, what do the speeches say when we listen to our politicians? It's always about how the opponent is bad, or how historically the opposing party or parties has been bad. But hardly is a competition on how better can I do for the future, or how better I am currently, or what prosperity I will bring. So there's a narrative that has taken over us in South Asian politics, which I feel that as more and more youth get, the chance to participate, as more and more netizens are directly participating in politics, viewing their opinions, and debating, that part can be challenged in a in a very small amount of time. But what part cannot be challenged is a lot of these nations, Bangladesh being in the forefront, bureaucracy has actually taken over democracy. The bureaucratic tangles is actually slowing us down in many, many places. The bureaucracy, in the name of sometimes nationalism, makes us protectionism, increases our isolation. So hence, like South Asia, it's got the lowest inter-regional trade. For hosting over 1/3 of the population of the world, we hardly trade, we hardly visit amongst ourselves. That is, that is a reality, that is a fact, and that's not a good fact, I would say. So going forward, we have to take these social issues into consideration. We have to take our regional, inter-regional or intra-regional issues into consideration. And as I said, if democracy then finally can be used the right way, if it's implemented the right way, it is the best solution for not just for Bangladesh but for South Asia in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Aul. Please welcome Biraz. Mr. Biraz, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Biraz, I have a question that very specific. As a as a politician, what can you do to ensure that you become and remain a democratic leader? Besides these, again, could intelligence agencies circumvent democracy by controlling media?
Sorry, Mr. Jubair, can you? I'm
Okay.
not being able to
I'm
hear
repeating.
your
I'm
question
repeating the
properly.
question.
Can you repeat it?
As a leader, what can you do to ensure that you become and remain a democratic leader?
Oh, okay. So, like all of my foremost speakers have said that one of the biggest problems in our part of the world is trying to implement the fundamentals of democracy. So in Nepal also, if you look at the 60 years of history, the forebearers of democracy and the principles of democracy were very good. But instead of the graph going upwards, it has come down. It has come down. So, which is very sad indeed. So, as a politician, right now, I am not in any particular political party. I have left my political party, which I represented a couple of years ago, precisely because the political parties have not performed according to what they have said about democracy, what they have said about society, and what they have said about how they'll transform our economy. So they've only talked about it, they only rant about it, but they don't implement it. So for the past 60 years, we have seen the same leadership in these political parties. And if you talk about changing generations or having fixed period of election and having internal democracy within the political parties, there's no democracy at all. And Nepal went through a period of internal conflict during the period of, let's say, from 1998 onwards to till about like 10 years on from there. So what happened after that was that basically the Maoists who came into the mainstream politics in 2003 brought with them basically violence and the money that was looted, all the all the years that they were in conflict, So that led the other political parties to do the same in their political parties, because they have to compete with the Maoists. So what happened in Nepal was that all the political parties started hiring goons in their political parties, started to receive black money from all the different contractors or corrupt people. That has ultimately led the political parties to be a group of corrupt people and goons in the political system. So for people who are, educated, people who have done something in their life, who are working and want to do something for the nation, are not joining political parties for the very reason because, it has become only interest led by few people in the political party. So as a result, political parties for the past 10 years, if you look at the different surveys that has been taken in Nepal, only 8% of the Nepali citizens believe in political party and leadership in our country right now. So as a result, for myself also, I have come out of political party because it's a very smelly place. It's a very terrible place at the moment. So I'm trying to, we have started a citizens movement to basically educate citizens on our political system, on our political parties, what has happened for the last 60 years. Has the concept of democracy and the principles of democracy, has it been implemented or not? And to make the citizens the utmost powerful agent within the democratic system, because ultimately when we talk about democracy, it's the people who have to decide as to how to go on forward. Do we want the same political parties who have not hold their promise for the last 30 years, or do we want a new political parties or new leadership where the democratic principles will be implemented properly? I will give you another example. In Nepal in 2008, the monarchy was abolished from Nepal. The political parties had claimed that the ex-king had killed the royal family members. It had amassed wealth abroad, and he was a despot trying to kill democracy. So 12 years from now, 12 years after, the people of Nepal have started to feel that the claims that were made by the political parties are coming out false. So was wealth found outside of Nepal? No. Was the royal family killing done by the king? No. So people started to feel that when the monarchy was there, at least it is unique in a way that if you look at the separation of powers, when we talk about judiciary, legislative, and executive, there is an additional institution of the monarchy that has added value to the democratic principles, so which is a unique system within Nepal also.
Thank you, Mr. Brad.
Mr. Jubair,
Thank you so
do I
much.
have?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
This question had been asked to Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel laureate, but she mentioned that this question is very provocative. That means why democracy matters. It is a provocative question because it implies many questions. Did it matters? Will it matter? Does it matter? Anyway, we are in our last session. I will request Mr. Shehzad to deliver your last speech in one sentence.
I cannot hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Firstly, I like to thanks to Young South Asian Young Politician Forum to inviting us on such a beautiful session, and I also appreciate your agenda and your idea to bring people closer to South Asian region. It's also beauty of democracy to closer the nations. It's also a very beautiful session. I'm honored to be the part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miss Priya.
Um, the speakers, Mr. Awal and Mr. Bista, raised very important points, and I would just like to, add on to that. I think the scourge of South Asia is that we have, see, the political parties represent the kind of democracy we have. If the level of democracy in the society is high, so is that in the political parties. It reflects that. But one of the major problems of our South Asian polities have been that they've been dominated by dynastic politics. So, one after the other, if you see all the major parties, majorly, um, they have all been dynastic. Now, in India, at least, people have started questioning, they've become very vociferous against the dynastic politics because of the changing demographic pattern here. A lot of youngsters, India is a country of young people now. The youngsters are asking questions because they're the ones
Miss
who need
Priya, Miss
opportunities.
Priya,
Yes.
listen to me. Do you think dynastic succession is opposite to democracy?
Yes, of course it is. Because see, the head start that
Why?
majorly, pardon, pardon, please. You asked why?
Yes.
Yes, it is because in the dynastic politics, you overlook majorly all the the candidates who are willing, who are capable, who are efficient to put in a lot of effort in politics, and you give the crown to somebody. Who gets a head start, a better head start than everybody, just by the fact that the person happens to be born in one or the other important political families. Most of the regional political parties in India, most of the the parties in the southern Asian countries, they've all been dynastic. This is one of the problems, and this is reflective of how we have run our politics. You may not disagree, but I think in our country there's a big upheaval against dynastic politics. It is being talked about everywhere, and I think it's time
Miss
now that
Priya,
India would
Miss Priya,
bid bye to dynastic politics. At least it will not be on
Miss,
the forefront. It will be a bad word from now on.
Miss Priya, sorry, I cannot
Thank you.
agree with you because
Yeah.
dynastic succession is also important for politics. And it's also a principle of democracy that the perfect will sustain. So if
So you
any
mean that a
person is not
person born
perfect, will
by
not
just the
sustain.
fact that the
So what
person
about
was
the
born in
dynastic
a particular
succession?
family becomes that makes the person perfect? We have a very good example here in India, and I would say, you just have to look at the example to understand that.
People
And
will
so is the case
decide.
with our neighboring countries, I would say.
Let let the people to decide who will be their leader. So I don't think dynastic succession is not against the democracy. It can run in a body. Let the people
Well, these are
decide
your
who is
views.
the
I
leader.
respect them. I respect them. Yes. Well, these are your views. I respect them, but we have a very different kind of viewpoints here in our party, and so is the case with majority of the Indians who think that dynastic politics is the scourge of the polity here in India. At least for our country, we can speak that we are there at the threshold now to say to bid goodbye to the dynastic politics. We want democracy in political parties as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Priya. Ms. Pastor, deliver your last speech in a sentence.
Okay, I agree that why democracy is matter. Is very vast point. In conclusion, we in South Asia country in the region cannot access to freedom without democracy. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Tabitawal.
Thank you. Democracy, as I said, if the objective is actually to give the accountability to the representatives and the power to the people. So in that situation, I mean, democracy is also very dynamic. It's changing, and it changes with the demographic of certain nations or the certain voting pattern. So South Asia's demographics, as we all know, is actually very young, very dynamic, and it's time that South Asian politicians and South Asian political structure changes to the needs of the time. Uh, just now that you and Miss Priya had two different views on a certain issue. That is exactly the beauty of our South Asian current diaspora and the future of South Asia. We're going to have to respect each other's views, but yet we are willing to coexist and move forward. And a democratic system can actually allow that space for everybody to together take the step forward. But in that system, justice and injustice also has to be very, very specifically looked at, because South Asians at the end of the day will not allow injustice to prevail in any part of this region, and especially in our respective countries, and Bangladesh, I consider in particular. So even when we see that the need for for a certain gender, females in this case, actually have to go out in the streets of Delhi, streets of Dhaka, streets of Kathmandu, streets of Kabul at times, and even in Karachi we've seen justice against rape, just gender-based violence. I mean, why is there a need to cry for this anymore? This should be an inalienable right. This should be the duty of the state to ensure justice. And ensuring justice is by carrying out a swift investigative procedure and a judicial system. The outcome, everybody will respect the court of the law. But the system we should not become victims of a system. We should be the beneficiaries of a system. And that is South Asia, I believe. And that is what South Asian current diaspora wants. And I really hope that our current and future governments start adjusting to that. Thank you again to you, as well as the great friends I've just made on this platform.
Thank you so much. Mr. Beras, this is your last session. Just finish through one sentence.
Okay, thank you again. Well, again, why democracy matters is a very important question for all of us. But again, why would democracy matter? And what is our goal in terms of why should democracy matter to us? So if you want to know my individual perspective, I would want prosperity for my country. I would want inclusiveness for my country. I want real transformation, a political transformation of our country. I want real economic transformation and independence and sustainability for my country. But has it been achieved in the last 60 years of our democratic history of our country? No. So that has led to serious questioning, not only for myself, for rest of the citizens of our country. So have we seen democracy transform into reality? No. So that has led to basically huge questioning by the citizens of Nepal. But that does not necessarily mean that we stop and then we look for another system within our country. We have to keep trying. So for people like us and the youth of South Asia, we need to seriously think about how to implement our goals, our democratic goals into our system. How do we change the current political leadership from our country? And of course, within the South Asian countries also, some countries are doing relatively good. And for a country like for Nepal, it looks good on paper, but on reality, it's a real bad shame. For example, if I have to talk about the women in our country, 44% of women represent the local level in our country right now. 80% of which, of the 44%, 80% of which belong to the untouchables, the Dalit class. So has real power been transformed onto the women? Uh, on paper it looks good that there are 44%, but in reality the number of violence, the number of rapes have gone up, and not real power has been transformed to the women in our country.
Thank you,
So
Mr. Braz.
it has only looked good. Yes.
Thank you so much. We are in our last stage.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you
you, honorable
so
speakers, for
much.
joining in the conference. We have enjoyed an excellent discussion by the talented politicians. We all are promised to ensure the congenial atmosphere for best democracy. This session has been very competent and comments of the audiences are really appreciated. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye and
Good
good
night.
night for everyone.
Good night.
Yeah, good night.